I'd like to welcome Mohan Sivaloganathan. He is a prominent figure in the fields of leadership and social impact, and recognized for his innovative approaches to education, equity, and community engagement. He is the founder of Harmonious Leadership, a movement aimed at redefining leadership paradigms to foster social change and inclusivity. Mohan advocates for breaking down the traditional dichotomy between well-being and performance in leadership, promoting a holistic approach that encourages both personal fulfillment and organizational success. Prior to founding Harmonious Leadership, he served as the CEO of Our Turn, a national youth-led initiative focused on closing opportunity gaps in education for young people. His work has earned him accolades such as being named one of New York's nonprofit media 40 under 40 rising stars and recognized as next generation leader by the Human Services Council. Mohan is also an acclaimed TED speaker, known for his talk titled The Breakthrough Power of Young Leaders, where he emphasized the importance of intergenerational respect and collaboration in leadership. Welcome, Mohan. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for sharing the bio too. I was just thinking like, I just do stuff. Hopefully of good quality. But yeah, I'm a doer.
It's always interesting hearing the bio read by somebody else. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us your journey and the key aha moments that have gotten you to where you are to focus on breakthrough leadership.
You know, what's interesting is I'm a part of this leadership community. I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to describe it. It's called the Joyful Impact Accelerator. It's hosted by this fantastic group called Building Impact Partners. What they are out in the world trying to do is to advance transformative change by mobilizing money and resources and capital in ways that are truly transformative, that are truly centered on communities and liberatory practices. And as a part of this, my cohort, we got together recently, and what they asked us to do was to chart our sense of joy and our impact over time. So the x-axis being time and the y-axis being essentially like the magnitude of our joy or our impact, and on two different lines. And so I worked on this, and this line for me started at like a pretty high place, like literally as far as I can remember, as far back as I can remember. And, it would have some ups and downs, but still pretty much stayed above that zero line, so to speak. There was a pretty big dip when my dad passed away about 4 years ago, and it's come back up. And there have been some jagged points, but it's come back up. And I bring that up because when you think about like some of the typical indicators of, whether someone is doing well or they're not, right? Like there could be things that I could look back at and say, hey, like maybe that joy line should have been lower, or you might have assumed that because my parents came to the country without financial means, without a defined career path. They came from a country that has been gripped by civil war for too long of its history. And so in some ways they were escaping, but then they still have family members who are there in Sri Lanka. And there were all these things, being immigrants, navigating the US, bouncing around from place to place, and like this sense of isolation, frustration, all these different things, right? But like I can say in all honesty that as I reflect on my journey, and in many ways because of my parents, I don't see it as a story of suffering. I don't see it as a story of hardship and hardship and hardship. Overcoming, yes, absolutely. But I actually I am grateful to have this story that is marked by joy. My parents never allowed me to feel like I was less than anyone else. They always instilled in me this belief that I deserve to be great, that I deserve to be exceptional. And even when I deviated from some of the paths that they envisioned for me, because like I started my career in engineering and corporate supply chain management, that's what I majored in school. And then I'm like, hey, y'all, like I'm really inspired by politics and social change. So I'm actually going to like pivot, and I'm going to go to Teach for America as a marketing director. And by the way, I'm going to have a lower salary. And also I'm going to leave tens of thousands of dollars in retirement money on the table with my prior company because I'm not vested yet. They weren't really thrilled about that. They still had my back. They still supported me. And I think that brings me to this moment, this today, when I think about this notion of like the aha moment, right? Where I think so many of us are conditioned into feeling like we need to be defined by scarcity. Like we need to be defined by loss. We need to be defined by longing. And it's not that I don't have those feelings. Like I do. There is some sense of longing in me, right? There is always something I feel like that I'm hustling, that I'm trying to prove. But that's not the headline of my story. Like the headline of my story is being radically joyful, of being loving, of being willing to laugh in just about any set of circumstances. And someone asked me recently, like, what would I want my son to say about me, let's say 40 years from now? Uh, and I told him, like, I think it actually would be the same thing that he might say about me right now, which is that I'm full of love and joy and curiosity. I love tapping into my inner child, and I think that's become so much clearer for me now, at this stage of my life and career, naturally with more grays in my beard.
Join the club, right? So what year did your parents come from Sri Lanka?
So my dad came first in, I think it was 77, if I
Okay.
remember, 77 or 78. And then my mom came in 81.
Yeah. Because my
Um,
parents came in 69 and it was, quite the challenge. Not that many people from India or Sri Lanka, even when your parents came. But I think they were driven by one thing. That is they saw a brighter future than where they were at that time. And they did it for themselves as well as I'm sure for you. So I think that's one of the things that really drove them.
there's a vision that there could be something greater, not knowing what it is, but there could be something greater. I think in particular for my dad, it was, I think, also like that feeling that he deserved something more. My mom in many ways actually was happy in Sri Lanka. Like she was a college professor. My mom is someone who can make friends anywhere she goes. Like she's someone who's like filled with like just gregariousness and joy in any space. She could always build a sense of community. So she was actually good. She was fine in Sri Lanka. But my dad is like, you know what? Like I need to create a new story.
So how did that lead you to focus on leadership? I'm curious.
It's been a journey, right? There have been many steps, a lot of learnings along the way. When I started my career, I was very much driven by like, hey, we need to change the world. We need to transform all the systems. I was just reflecting on this with a friend the other day. When I came to Teach for America, like the marketing headline there was, something like, 15 million kids are in poverty. What are you going to do about it? And I wasn't intimidated by that. And hopefully I didn't mess up that number. Maybe we can fix that in post if we have to. But I wasn't intimidated by that. I was like, all right, yes, like tens of millions of kids in poverty. Let's go change that, and let's change it right now. And that gave me this sense of like audacity and ferocity in the work. And again, being the son of immigrants, like I wasn't scared to hustle. Like I wasn't scared to push the envelope, to try and be innovative, to ask the questions that typically would not be asked. Like I certainly was not the model minority by any stretch, because I was always the one who people felt like was being too loud, ruffling too many feathers, sometimes getting out of pocket, getting out of my lane. And like that type of disposition carried with me through a lot of different steps in my career. From Teach for America to still working in education to moving into human services, work with veterans and civic engagement. And then, as you noted, I most recently worked at Our Turn. And what was so illuminating for me, was how much the folks I worked with, folks from Black, Indigenous, Latino communities, immigrant communities, LGBTQ, primarily young people, Gen Z, how insistent they were on the how of the work. Like systems change, yes. Policy change, yes. But how we do it every day matters. A friend of mine, he says that the future that you want to create has to reflect the process right now. The process has to be congruent with where you're trying to go. Like we wound up building just what I would argue was a world-class culture at Our Turn because we spent so much time thinking about the how. And it was when I started preparing for my transition from Our Turn when this light bulb turned on for me, where, I was thinking about like what could be next for me. What is the issue area, that I want to work in, like the type of work that my organization does, and so on and so forth. I think some of the typical questions you might have when you're considering a transition. But what the light bulb was realizing, hey, like I could be working in climate, I could be working in education, I could be working in corporate social responsibility. I mean, you name it. The unifying force across all of that makes or breaks any of those ideas or strategies, it is the quality and sustainability of leadership. And we are in a moment right now where people have had enough of the old forms of leadership. And they're saying, I'm not going to do that anymore because they recognize how important the how is. Like they don't want to sacrifice their well-being anymore, or they don't want to have to sacrifice their purpose and their performance anymore. They demand both. And I keep talking about this notion of deserving. Like we deserve to have both. Like we deserve to be able to have healthy minds and bodies and spirits and to be able to advance our purpose in the most powerful and effective ways possible. And so I saw this as a unifying thread. And that's what I felt like, you know what, like that notion of reimagining leadership, that's what I want to breathe new consciousness into right now. I want to represent and embody that idea. I didn't know what the structure was going to be. And to be honest, I'm still not positive as to what the structure should be. I'm doing a lot of different things in this field and space right now. But I know that this idea of harmonious leadership, that's not going anywhere. Like I'm going to continue to try and bring that into the world and try to embody it with everything I do.
So explain that a little bit more, because you're merging the well-being and performance into unified leadership philosophy. So if you don't mind, explain the details of that and how that's different than other leadership styles.
Well, if you think about other leadership styles, you know, oftentimes like there's this compartmentalization that happens, right? Where it's solely about the team. It is solely about a command and control type of approach. It is solely about your well-being. Like we pick these different things apart, but as human beings, that's not how we live, right? Like we don't compartmentalize ourselves that way. Like that's not how we function. It's not how our physiology is designed. So that led me down this path to think about like the notion of harmony. What does that look like in a leadership context? Because if you think about it in a music context, because that, you know, music has been one of the most powerful forces in my life for as long as I can remember. Indian music, hip hop music, to American standards, like you name it. You know, a top 40 song is not just as simple as you got a great beat, you got a good singer, you just throw them together, and then you got yourself a top 40 song. Like harmony happens when you have the right vocals, the right melodies, the right lyrics, that right fusion and confluence of the different instruments, right? Like all these different things have to come together that ultimately create this notion of harmony, something that lifts the sum of the parts. So what harmonious leadership is about is like, what are some of those different tactics, some of those different approaches that would represent harmony? And so, for example, there is something like having a unity of purpose when you operate. So this is one of multiple components within the harmonious leadership model. Unity of purpose, what that means is that the work is not necessarily about all these different individual goals and individuals just going after their own aspirations, but actually having a shared sense of aspiration. Now, when you have a shared sense of aspiration, what winds up happening? Well, from the well-being standpoint, you feel like you are connected to something that is bigger than yourself. And that actually helps people to perform greater. That helps them to have a greater sense of personal satisfaction, right? Like this is one of the critical ingredients for what people define as something as, you know, one of their best jobs in their career. And this has been studied, is feeling like you are a part of something with other people. What also happens at the same time with respect to performance with the unity of purpose is you break down silos. And as we know, in large, complex global organizations or even domestic and local organizations, silos can be the thing that inhibits your greatest innovation and your greatest efficacy. So when you have a unity of purpose, you break down the silos. Now you have people across different functions who are able to communicate with each other effectively. You have not only that willingness to communicate, but also willingness to offer generosity of spirit and to be able to help each other out. And when that happens, that is, again, how you're able to give that sustainable jet fuel to your boldest and most transformative ideas. So again, unity of purpose, it's one of those things that hopefully it's clear here that it operates at that unique harmony point, that unique intersection between how can you feel good and then also how you can do good.
So what are 3 things or steps you take to educate and get people on this track when they've maybe come from a more traditional, you know, background of leadership and education and stuff? How do you get them to get on the path you're talking about?
Well, first, we have to address the mindsets. We have to address the mindsets. You know, like it's not hard to go online and to say, go into AI, go into ChatGPT, do some research and say, hey, tell me about cutting edge leadership characteristics. Like it's not hard. You can find that. Many different organizations have published it, experts and other thought leaders have published stuff like that. What that doesn't address, however, is, you know, you can then take some of those things, go to your organization, say you could take unity of purpose and start telling everybody, hey, you need to have a unity of purpose. But if you haven't addressed the mindsets that brought your organization to where it is and the current consciousness it has around leadership, you're not going to get very far. Like any change is going to be superficial. You might have a backlash later on. You're going to regress. And I think we've seen that with so many organizations and companies right now. When you think about all the political and cultural pressure that organizations are facing, how often they're swinging the pendulum back and forth, it's because they've never built sustainable mindsets within the organization. And so what winds up happening is you regress to a past that oftentimes was not effective, and it certainly is not effective right now. So that's the first thing that I'll do with leaders and organizations, that I'll talk with them about, like, what are the mindsets that you're holding around leadership right now? Like why is that? Is that because of that's the way you were trained? Maybe it was because of your parents. Maybe it's because of your cultural upbringing. There could be a lot of reasons, and that's all okay. Even for me, like I grew up idolizing alpha males. Like I've had to work to unwire my thoughts and beliefs and internal disposition around being an alpha male. So we'll talk about the mindsets, right? And what are the types of shifts that need to be able to happen within the organization. From there, we'll start thinking about, now what are the actual characteristics, right? Like I mentioned, there's unity of purpose, there's agency, there's storytelling, there's generosity of spirit. There's some of these other components that you want to then be able to build into the organization. So now it's not just socializing it, but helping folks to understand, how do you actually execute with these different components within your organization? Like how do you bring them to life at that individual level and at that collective level? Then the third thing is, how do you sustain it? Because again, that's where things can get broken, right? That's where, again, like you wind up swinging the pendulum back and forth, as if you haven't spent the time to be able to sustain your practices. So, there are a number of practices within organizations that exist to sustain some form of change or status quo. Those are things like performance reviews, for example, your organizational dashboards and your metrics, the way you do your annual reporting. These are all different critical levers that you can consider when it comes to like that sustainability side. And they need to be updated, right? They need to be reflective and congruent with the type of change you're trying to create. And then that winds up being a cycle across those three different components.
So what are the key three, I guess, benefits you've seen that come out of this type of leadership?
I mean, even my work with Our Turn, for instance, and I think it's something that's very much could be extrapolated to many different types of organizations, and I've seen this with organizations I've worked with. For one, think about, and this is in no particular order, this context that we're in right now. You have 30% of people who feel engaged at work. And that's according to a Gallup study. And that's an all-time low. 30% of people who feel engaged. So what winds up happening when 30% of people are engaged? They're not going to drive the innovation that is so necessary right now. They're potentially a flight risk. We hear about quiet quitting. Sometimes we hear about loud quitting. We're not too far removed from the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffling, all the layoffs that have been happening, right? Like we're still essentially in that moment right now. And so one thing that we were able to do at Our Turn, I think because of this investment in leadership and culture, we had a 100 net promoter score. So 100% of people said they would strongly recommend Our Turn as a place to work. And this is a national organization, particularly or primarily focused on Gen Z, like the very group that folks are so afraid will up and leave you at any time. The folks weren't just up and leaving us. Like they were excited. They were proud. They were driving game-changing innovation, which takes me to the second point, which is organizational performance. Even though we were a lean organization, I would say leaner than we would have liked. And I think that's because of the unfortunate realities of nonprofit fundraising and the philanthropic landscape. Our impact was transcendent. We were able to compel the Federal Department of Education to require $53 billion in investments to have student input as a part of it, which is unheard of, to have that type of commitment to what young people have to say about their future of education. $53 billion. We're able to influence policy change at the state level, at the local level. We built partnerships with national organizations that had greater reaches than us, who are now investing in student engagement and the leadership of young people. So that impact was national, and it is touching so many places that we weren't even able to see because it was traveling to so many different areas. So we were shifting consciousness. And then last but not least, I think about the pipeline of leadership, both within the organization and outside the organization. I saw folks who, when I came to the organization, were quiet, sort of boxed in, as they would describe it, talk about imposter syndrome. And, this is sort of like the antithesis, right, of again, that hyper masculine, alpha male, loud command and control model of leadership. But these folks wind up, growing to become C-suite leaders within an organization and to become senior leaders and to drive some of the most influential changes, not just within the organization, but in the entire country. We had folks who would then, transition on, particularly students who would transition from full-time roles or part-time roles, I should say, within the organization as students to working in U.S. senator offices, to launching their own nonprofits, to becoming doctors, becoming lawyers. Like that legacy goes beyond any 501c3 organization. Like these are people who are going to go out and literally change the world, and they're doing it right now. Like, isn't that the type of leadership we want to bring into the world? Right. And for us to be willing to say, you know what, you don't always have to do that within the confines of our 501c3 within our organization. If this can be a space where you can nurture and cultivate that talent and leadership and do something incredible, but then you go off somewhere else, but you know what, more power to you. That's one of my favorite things of, like, when I go onto LinkedIn, for example, is seeing what alumni of our organization are out there doing in the world right now.
Interesting. So I'm curious, you talked about the current environment being very uncertain and tumultuous, as well as lots of layoffs. How is that impacting you and what you do, and how are you adapting?
Oh boy, I mean, we need a lot of time, I think, to be able to address that. I think about, January of this year, February of this year, and asking folks in my circles, friends, family, hey, how are you doing? Everybody just heavy, right? Heavy, down and out, demoralized, just in different shades and forms. And I was feeling it too. And what was funny was that, like, there were maybe 2 or 3 people along the way, like, I'm good, I'm doing good. And I said, oh, how? Like, because it was like shocking. How are you doing so well? And they're like, yeah, I don't watch the news. Okay, got it. Like, that makes sense. So it is a heavy time. And I think I carry multiple things with that right now. I think first and foremost, I mentioned at the top of our conversation, living a joyful life, right? And I think that is naturally where my energy goes. That is naturally where my light gravitates. And where I am right now is thinking about, how can I be a part of and spark the most joyful thing right now? Like, literally right now, knowing that the DOE is in shambles, like knowing that our international position right now is in shambles. Our sense of economic fairness is in shambles. You can just keep going. Yes, that's all real and true, but also what's real and true, as I look out of my window, I could step into any school in my area right now, and young people are going to be doing something that is transformative and blowing the minds of adults, and smiling and laughing, and then going into the playground and having fun. And like, you could multiply that anywhere. And like, that is happening right now. Somewhere else, I could look in another direction. There's going to be a community organization that is bringing people together to cook food together, to dance, to, like, something I was doing last week, to be in a drumming circle, to paint, to come up with a new idea. Like, that is happening. And it's happening by the thousands, it's happening by the millions. And so that, in many ways, is the most powerful form of resistance, right? It is the most powerful way that we can not only have resilience to push through, but to renew. And that is where I'm trying to spend as much of my time and energy as possible, while also not being naive, not being jaded by what's happening. I recognize what's happening deeply. I think I carry this sort of, like, oscillating level of, I think, overwhelm and anxiety in me at all times. And in many ways, it's because of that I am so insistent on being in spaces where there is laughter and connection and belonging and storytelling, just in volume, in abundance. And that's how I think we're going to win.
I think you're right. I think a lot of his mindset, going back to what you talked about, his mindset. How do you tell someone who may not have the same mindset as you to make this shift?
Well, I guess, like, so I guess it depends on the shift, right? And so if we're talking about, I think if it's a leadership shift, that's a little bit easier, because what you can examine is, like, what is it that you're holding on to, and how's that serving you? And so I think that can be a little bit more precise, particularly if you're an organizational leader. Now, a lot of times organizational leaders, they don't want to hear that, right? They don't want to receive that type of challenge. Uh, but I think what's interesting and ironic is that so many folks in CEO positions and senior leader positions, the things that we're hearing from Gen Z, like they want it for themselves too, right? Like they also want greater sense of harmony. They also want to feel more connected to their teams. They also want greater purpose, but they've been so stuck in a conditioned system for so long that it's almost like I don't know any other way out. So that's a matter of thinking about like how do we change the calculus of what change, like how do you drive change? How can you move in a direction that actually better serves you? So that's one type of shift. Now, if we're talking about a mindset of, say, feeling demoralized, given again the state of the world, feeling depressed, feeling down, at least personally, I don't think it's my job to shift them necessarily.
No, I'm not saying it's your job. I'm just curious if somebody came to you and say, "Hey, I really like your mindset. How can I have some of that?"
I think that it so much starts with affirmation. I really do. Like, I think that we've been living for so long feeling like the problem must be me. There must be something wrong with me. Like, I've had that experience. I still have that experience to this day of feeling like, oh, I've got these different sensations in my body, these inner thoughts, these challenges, like there's something wrong with me. And I mean, even if I don't explicitly say that, and I think so many people carry that baggage. And what I think is important is first to discover that no, it's not just you. There isn't something wrong with you. Like you don't need to be fixed. And we've got this culture that is always telling you that the person needs to be fixed. It's not the culture, it's not the system, but the person needs to be fixed. And I think that's so fundamentally off. And so I think the first step for anyone is to have a certain level of openness and curiosity as to like, how does my experience connect to others? And it may not be the same exact thing, right? Like I think naturally we might feel like, oh, well, I just lost a loved one and I lost a job and I'm dealing with this financial thing. Nobody else is dealing with that the way that I am. And that's fair, but that doesn't mean that you're the only one who's suffering. Like other people might be suffering. And what I find is that when you don't engage in like the suffering Olympics of like, oh, I could have had it worse. But like, we're all in this together. I think that can start to open the aperture and the door for some form of change, for some form of action. Now, those actions can be really small, because I think, another thing that's kind of like put upon us, kind of perpetrated in our society is like, you can just wake up one day and like, this light turns on and like, I am a different human being now. And now I'm just so grateful. And I look to the sky and the birds and the flowers and like, isn't it all great? Like, I wish that were possible. I do. Like, I wish it were that easy. But it's not. Like, it takes oftentimes like small steps, like meditating for 5 minutes in a day, taking a 5-minute walk once a day, opening up a journal and writing one sentence, even writing one sentence in a week. And then maybe it turns into 2 sentences. And then maybe it turns into a couple sentences in a day. And then it starts to grow, right? Like, and, it's things like that. It's like picking up the phone and talking to a friend you haven't talked to every Sunday. And then over time, you're talking to 2 people and then you're talking to 3 people. Like, I think those little things make a huge difference. And I've been fortunate, I would say, to be exposed to that type of wisdom from so many different people. And I also just have this voracious appetite for learning. So I've read a lot. And that's, I think, helped me to like really be able to expand my toolbox, and so, in order to be able to take the small steps. And I think that's something that I believe is worth aspiring to, is just taking some small steps.
I think that always makes a difference. To take any big task on, it's always better than doing it in bite-sized pieces, right? So I'm curious, even with this environment of uncertainty and turmoil, what opportunities are you seeing that didn't exist before?
Well, I think that there's an awakening happening right now. There's an awakening. A lot of people came off of for example, coming off the last election saying that we need to do things differently. I'm not going to do things the way that they've been done before. That could be regarding, political and electoral strategy. That could be related to corporate social responsibility. That could be related to other forms of social impact. So there is an awakening that is happening right now. And I think that is a massive opportunity for us to not go back to the old normal, but to actually create a new normal. And I think about a new normal that is not just going on offense or going on defense, but actually a third way approach to things. So it's not always anchored around, hey, there's something crazy. What do I do about this crazy thing? But just how do you want to live right now? And I find that there are people across sectors and backgrounds and geographies who are hungry for that, who I think are just waiting for the permission and the allyship from someone else so that they can be able to jump into the arena too and to be able to drive that type of change. And I think that's why I'm so fortunate that in any given week, I could be connecting with someone who's in the education arena. I could be connecting with someone who's in corporate healthcare, someone who's in corporate finance, someone who is in philanthropy. But all these folks are unified by this belief that we need to do things differently. And, if not now, then when? There's so much that's at stake right now. There is so much urgency. And so let's go out and do it. Let's go out and let's do the thing. And that makes me very optimistic. It really does. I feel very optimistic because I don't center on executive orders as the determinant of our prosperity, but actually as people as the determinant of our prosperity. And I just have a lot of faith in people power right now.
So I'm curious, where do you see yourself spending your attention and interest going in the forward? Are there certain areas that you really want to spend more time in and learn about? And if so, why?
I appreciate that we've talked a lot about this notion of consciousness and the mindsets. And that's an area where I really want to spend a good amount of time. I kind of think about it from a macro and a micro perspective. So I think at the macro level, being able to do this work that can help people to be able to shift their hearts and minds around leadership and to be willing to take some of those bold and courageous steps to be the humans, the full humans, the leaders that they can be, that they should be, that they deserve to be. And I think that happens in a number of different ways. And so, for me, one of those things I love to do is I love keynote speaking and performing, being able to get in a stage, share stories, share insights, offer a roadmap for how you can affect change. I love doing that because I feel like it forges a very unique connection for me and with the people around me and with different types of sectors. For example, I'm doing a talk next month with a community of chief information officers and chief information security officers. It's a very unique environment, but they're all thinking about how can I be a more harmonious leader? And so I'm learning a lot in that type of space. I'm also thinking about just being able to lean into creativity more and more because white papers are great, polling and research, that's all great. It's all helpful, but that's not going to change the world on its own. We need the arts, we need culture, we need music, we need film, we need dance. And so I'm launching some projects in those arenas soon. I'm trying to help and support related projects as well, because really I think that arts and culture actually could be the thing that helps us to be able to break through and to be able to do that at the macro level. Then I think about that at a micro level, just trying to be there for people, right? And thinking about how I can do that in more intimate ways as a coach, as a mentor, as an ally. I'm working with a few folks right now who kind of span philanthropy and social impact on a new leadership cohort model, where it would be for a small group of folks, an intimate space, an authentic space where people can really be able to grapple and unpack some of the biggest challenges that are facing them right now, specifically within philanthropy, but then how to be able to make switches and shifts so that they can be as effective as possible in this moment. So that's something that's happening more at that micro, intimate level. So yeah, I'm trying to build the right fusion, I think, across those different domains.
Yeah, I see an opportunity. I'd be curious to see what you think, if you agree or not, where people are going to be looking to enhance their skill sets, hard and soft skills moving forward and becoming more of a master of their own domain and what they're going to do. So I think a big part of it is going to be education and enhancing personal skill, capabilities and depth of skills as well. What do you think?
I love that. Yeah, I think that's real, and I feel like what that's able to do also is hopefully guide people in a direction to really be able to double down on their superpowers. Because that notion from maybe 20 years ago of here is the job that you aspire to, which requires these 5 skills, these check boxes, and then here's the next job, and then the next job, that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, for the most part, right? Think about how much is this being created.
But even if it does exist, I think you're also talking about something. There's a mind shift that people want more.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's related. The two are related. Would you agree?
I think people want more, and that's not only I think again there's this stereotype of people want more because they just want more vacation. Yeah, sure. But like they want more impact. Like they want more innovation. They see that the way the economy is functioning right now, it doesn't work and it's not sustainable. Like it can be better. And in order for us to do that, like we can't keep employing the same old formulas. And so, yes, like I think that that sense of personal development and skill development, but doing that in a way where it serves the greater good, where it serves the collective, like that's the unlock, right? Because if it's just a bunch of individual operators all over the place, that's not actually going to solve the problem. The problem that we have right now, which is pervasive, is a massive sense of isolation, of loneliness, of people feeling disconnected, polarization, division. Like I can keep going. Like this stuff is well documented. Um, so it has to be like, yes, like I am bettering myself, but I'm bettering myself because here's what I can put into the world. Like here is how other people can be able to benefit from it. And I think once we can build that mindset, like that critical mass, like then we're really going to make some special things happen.
Yeah, I think people are seeking personal growth, freedom, but also more balance as well.
Oh yes, yep, certainly, certainly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like it doesn't do us any good if people are hustling and then they're innovating and then they're burnt out 6 months later, and then we have a brain drain. Like no, like we do not have an endless supply of people to just fill those roles when people get burnt out and they leave.
So I typically ask the last question to my guests. If you could have lunch or dinner with anyone in your industry, who would it be and why?
So I'm releasing my debut film this year, the short film called In Pursuit Of, centered on my late father. And I've really enjoyed the process of filmmaking. I grew up loving movies and films, and they've been so influential in my life. And I'm thinking about someone like Ava DuVernay, who is a phenomenal, brilliant storyteller, filmmaker. I've seen a lot of her work. I've always been moved by her work. And I think there's so much intention and creativity and artistry that comes forward in what she's done. So I think with her, that yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, that'd be fun. Maybe second, like a Michael B. Jordan. I feel like we'd be able to talk about film and basketball and hip hop and all sorts of things. These are all things I love. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, listen, Mohan, I want to thank you for joining me today and thank you for your insights and sharing, where you think things are headed and what areas you want to focus on. I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much.
Same to you. Thanks for the time.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.